Coming up on today's show, we'll give you our thoughts on what Jerry Dipoto told us on Wednesday, plus we'll react to MLB Pipeline's top 100 prospects list. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Friday, January 27th, 2023. This is Trident for the Locked On Mariners podcast, joined as always by Colby Patnode. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link as well as our social accounts is in the description below. On the show today, we'll be giving you some of our biggest takeaways from our interview with Jerry Dipoto on Wednesday. But first, Colby, let's talk MLB Pipeline, which released its top 100 prospects list for 2023 last night, and there are two Seattle Mariners on the list. Starting off with Harry Ford, who's at number 49. He makes quite a bit of a jump here from 65 at the end of last year's list to 49 this year. And then Bryce Miller making his debut in the top 100 at number 98. So let me get your first reaction to this. Anyone too high, too low on the list? Any snubs here? Where do you want to start with this?
There is no legitimate reason whatsoever for Jack Leiter to be ranked higher than Bryce Miller. None. Jack Leiter was terrible last year.
Yeah.
He cannot find the strike zone right now. He is a guy who is supposed to move fast, who is going to have to repeat AA. There's no reason. The only reason that MLB Pipeline could give, and it's not a good one, is that, well, Leiter was, the number 1 overall pick or the number 2, whatever pick he was. So what? Bryce Miller has a better fastball. He has better control. He has better command. He's a better athlete. He throws more strikes. He's got better secondary pitches, and he's closer to the big leagues. Why the difference? Jack Leiter's not good. He's not a good prospect right now. If the Pirates were offered Jack Leiter or Bryce Miller for Brian Reynolds, they're taking Bryce Miller, and they're not thinking twice about it right now. Jack Leiter is not a good prospect. Leiter doesn't deserve to be in the top 100. He certainly doesn't deserve to be higher than Bryce Miller, so we can start there. Other than that, no, I'm not too surprised. I thought maybe Celestin would have possibly cracked the top 100, but none of the international signing guys from this year did. I don't believe so. That one I understand. He's only 17. He hasn't played professional baseball yet, so I get that.
Yeah.
Ford, I think, is honestly a little too high, and I'm a Harry Ford fan. It just really
top 50.
It's not like he tore the cover off the ball last year or anything like that. He had a good year. I mean,
yeah,
and he's a good prospect, but top 100, sure. Top 50,
yeah.
I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think the gap between Miller and Ford is also too large. I think they should both be in the probably 60 to 70 range.
Agreed.
But I'm not too surprised overall that it's just two. My guess is that Celestin, still need to learn how to pronounce that, Celestin, and Cole Young are probably pretty darn close to top 100 as well.
And maybe even Gabby Gonzalez is close to the fringe as well there. So, yeah, I agree with you that Miller's too low, and this is really just based off of everything that I've been hearing over the last couple of months from prospect folks. It just seems 98 is a bit too low, because I've heard him mention, amongst the names of like Bobby Miller of the Dodgers, who's ranked 24 on this list. So to have that big of a disparity between someone like Miller and, both Millers, right? Bobby and Bryce, is a little bit jarring. At the end of the day, Pipeline's lists, especially as of late, have been, let's just say it, widely inaccurate compared to what the rest of the industry feels. And so I don't put a ton of stock into them. I feel there are much better outlets out there for prospects, like Prospects Live, like Baseball America, etc. Right. So this I'm not getting too worked up over. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that Miller's at least getting his flowers a little bit here, and he is in the top 100, but he should be more in the middle of this list than at the back end of it. I can kind of wrap my head around why he's at 98. You know, not a lot of people know about him, I don't think, at least in terms of the national circuits, but yeah, I just he should be higher on this list. Especially, I'm glad that you mentioned Jack Leiter, because look, even, you know, to be fair to the Rangers for a second, Brock Porter should be higher than Jack Leiter right now, in my opinion. Brock Porter, I think is only 4 spots ahead of Miller on this list right now. So, yeah. So I think there's a lot of stock put into the names of these guys rather than where they're actually at right now, and I think that's really evident here with Miller and Leiter.
Right. It's Pipeline is really slow to correct, essentially, what their preconceived notion was, and a big part of the reason for that is that they don't talk to scouts. Most of what the information they get comes from front offices, major league front offices, and it's mostly coming from talking to the teams that have the rights to these players, right? So all their information on Bobby Miller comes from the Dodgers front office, which, I mean, cool, but of course those guys are going to talk up their own players, right? They're not going to tell you the negatives about that. So there's a system in place at Pipeline that makes it susceptible to these big movers and those guys getting overlooked and them trying to stand by their like draft ranks and all that stuff. So they're a little bit slow to adapt because they're not talking to the right people. But also somehow they've become the default, like de facto, oh, Bryce Miller's the 98th best prospect in baseball. And we just kind of accept that. Why? Because Pipeline said it. It's mostly because it's free. If we're being honest with you, it's a free top 100 list. That's why it kind of gets used as
it's Major League Baseball's top 100 list, right?
And it comes from like guys who are respected in the industry, like John Mayo and guys like
Jim
that.
Callis,
yeah. But those guys, again, they're not talking to the people who are watching these, and they're not asking, Ranger scouts what they think about Bryce Miller. They're asking Ranger scouts what they think about Jack Leiter. So of course they're going to pump up Leiter. They're not going to trash their own player. So it's just a flawed list overall. But at the end of the day, 2 guys on the top 100. That's about what I expected. Like I said, I think Ford is a little high, and I think Miller is a little low. But yeah, it's about what I expected. So no real surprises.
It's a nice hat you got on, by the way.
Yes.
Show that to the folks there. The vanilla missile snapback right there.
Yeah.
When do you think he might crack one of these lists?
Well, if you ask him, he should have already been on it. But
exactly, he should be number 1 on this list according to the vanilla missile himself.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of nicknames for all these prospects, Vanilla Missile is definitely number 1.
Definitely got to be up there.
The undisputed champion.
I wouldn't be too surprised, honestly, if he was on it. This time next year, like on the back end, like 100. But if he progresses like people think he can, or at least people I've talked to think he can, he's going to be on one of these lists at some point before he makes the big leagues. It's pretty electric fastball.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into our thoughts about what Jerry told us back on Wednesday here in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by FanDuel. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's LOCKEDON. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Tonight, the Kraken are 1.5 goal favorites over the visiting Calgary Flames, but no Matty Beniers. So I'm not saying bet against the Kraken here, but you might want to take a look at that. That's all I'm going to say. And that's all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's LOCKEDON. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. and you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So, we talked to Jerry Dipoto back on Wednesday, and first, want to thank you guys for all the support. Well, I kind of blacked out. I was like on autopilot for most of that interview, and I had to rewatch it like about 2 times here to get prepared to have this discussion with you, because I could not for the life of me remember anything Jerry said because I was just on cloud 9 that whole interview. But now I've reviewed the tape, right? I've wound it all back. I've watched it again. And so I'm ready to talk about this interview, because we actually got some pretty good stuff out of Jerry in this interview. So where do you want to start here? We could go, we could talk about some of his comments on the draft. We could talk about some of his comments on just the offseason as a whole, Tommy La Stella, if they're done or not. Actually, yeah, let's start there. So we've talked about this on Patreon, on our Patreon show, patreon.com/control-the-zone. I've asked you this very same question. Now we have a bit more context from Jerry on if the Mariners are done or not. He did leave the door open for another move and even mentioned, a trade during spring training, like the Gino Suarez trade he mentioned by name. But he also said simultaneously that he'd be surprised if they made another major league move as well. So if this is it, if La Stella is the final, big major league move, how do you feel about the offseason?
You should try to work in that song lyric. Like I said, I think it's we'll see, because Jerry did also hint at some, I don't remember the exact phrase he used, but recognizable names coming in as NRIs.
Right.
And, we've seen, like, for example, the Colin Moran one, that one could be pretty impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll wait and see what those look like. But overall, I think I'd probably say it was a good offseason. I wouldn't call it great. They're still relying on Jared Kelenic to be the everyday left fielder, or are they? That coming up a little bit later. Boom. I'm doing your job for you, Ty.
There we go.
Right. And the bullpen, as interesting as some of the arms they actually did bring in are, they didn't really, it's hard for me to say they definitely got better in the bullpen, right? They're counting on a lot to go right there. It's still Marco as the number 5 or Flexen. We'll probably talk about that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, overall, I think they did a really nice job of raising the floor, which in general also raises the ceiling of the ball club. But they didn't go out and they didn't add like I look at this roster and I don't see a team that's likely going to win 100 games without some major guy stepping up and having career years and stuff like that. And I think that opportunity was there. So I don't think that they quite exceeded my expectations. I think for the most part they met them, even with the type of players they acquired, because we talked a lot about Teoscar and Wong and Pollock before they made all those moves, and it all makes sense. It's all smart. So I can't say that it was a bad offseason. Even like La Stella as kind of like the bench guy and rotating through, and Moran, those are smart moves. Those are moves that make a lot of sense. So
sure.
I think it was a very smart offseason. I think it was a very safe offseason, I guess we'll say.
Sure.
Didn't take a lot of risk. Didn't feel like they needed to. So overall, I would probably give it, like, if we're doing like the Fan Fiction Friday, since it is Friday, I'd probably give this offseason as it looks right now, probably like a 55, because they did get better at the end of the day, and they did close the gap on the Astros. It's just not, a great offseason, unless they trade for like Brian Reynolds in March, which maybe happens. So yeah, I'd say it was solid, but not spectacular.
By the way, it is Brian Reynolds' birthday today. Happy birthday, Brian. We love you, pal. Can't wait to see you in an M's uniform. Yeah, so
July 28th. Mark it down.
Whoa. There we go. All right. I would say that I'm whelmed by the offseason as a whole.
But you didn't say it to Jerry. I wonder why.
Yeah, just threw him, softball questions, etc. Yeah, was shaking in my boots. Yeah. Maybe a bit underwhelmed on the back end of the offseason, after the Teoscar and Wong deals. I like the Pollock move, but also right now, as things currently stand, Pollock's probably an everyday player for the Mariners, and I don't think he should be. I don't think that's the best use of his talents right now at this point in his career. But we'll see how that all, gets hammered out. We'll see if Tommy La Stella is actually something now that he's further removed from the Achilles injuries and all that stuff. So, and Jerry talked about that quite a bit and why he's confident that La Stella can get back on track here. But yeah, I wish that they would have done a little bit more. It feels like they're still missing a bat. They got that DH spot pretty much wide open right now. And like, that's fine. That's what a lot of teams, especially the Mariners, prefer, is to be able to rotate guys through that DH. But I've said this in the past, I don't think there's enough good hitters on this roster right now to justify having the DH wide open. I think right now, as things currently stand, if you just want to kind of reflect back on the rest of the offseason, Michael Brantley would make a lot of sense for this roster right now. Just with how things right now kind of lined up. So, but overall, yeah, like you said, they got better. The folks out there saying that Wong from Frazier and Teoscar from Haniger are lateral moves at best are out of their mind. I'm sorry. Like, Teoscar is
also. Yeah, you're also out of your mind if you're calling them marginal upgrades.
Marginal,
no,
yeah.
They're significant.
They're pretty significant. I mean, you go look at what Mariners second baseman did last year, and then you look at what Colton Wong's done the last 2 years, and then you look at Teoscar's. Teoscar obviously got hurt earlier this year, but after he got back from his injury, he was essentially another Julio Rodriguez at the plate. Defensively, that's a whole nother topic, but. Yeah. Offensive production wise, and this team needed to get better offensively, and I think it did. I think the lineup is a lot lengthier than it was last year, and I think the most important part here too, right, is that they are significantly better this opening day than they were last opening day, and that's the big thing, right? And Jerry even said this. The season begins on opening day. It doesn't end. Like, they can go out and they can add more, and he said outright that he has the freedom to go out and add more. If they need to do it. So, but right now, and I think this is a good time to kind of transition into the left field talk.
Hold on.
Oh?
Real fast.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that ESPN ranked all 30 lineups in Major League Baseball, and they talked to scouts, front office, writers, blah, 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 and the Mariners came in at 7th. 7th best lineup in all of baseball, which is, I mean, again, it's ESPN, it's projection, it's opinion, but
I still I think it's pretty, like, in my personal opinion, I think it's safe to say that they're a top 10 lineup in baseball right now.
I think they're probably closer to 10 than 5, but
sure.
Yeah, like, so just the idea, because last year, if you had asked the same question, do you think the Mariners are in the top 10? No. So,
and I mean, like, what, all but one guy in their lineup right now, or maybe two? Yeah, because Pollock. All but two guys in their lineup right now sported a 100 plus WRC plus last year. Like, that's really good. That's a good spot to be in, and especially when you still have assets, to trade, and you have all these tools to get better.
Mean, like Dylan Moore at a higher WRC plus than insert good player here, and it's probably true. So I mean, like, Dylan Moore stand here reminding you that he's coming off the bench, and Tom Murphy's coming off the bench, and
there you go.
Tommy La Stella's coming off the bench. So yeah, it's a good lineup. It really is.
Yeah.
Not great, but good.
So going into the left field stuff, Jerry mentioned how important it is for them to at least give this one more go with guys like Jared Kelenic, Taylor Trammell, because if they do hit, if at least one of them hits and finally gets it going here, I mean, that does mean a lot for the future of this organization. If they have an affordable left field option who's pumping out a 115, 120, 125 WRC plus with good defense, like, they're in a fantastic position. So I get why, like, when Jerry justifies that, like, I get why. I'm still not super comfortable with it, don't get me wrong, but I understand, like, the process of doing that as an organization, and having to weigh the risk reward of that. And look, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, and they're gonna probably cycle through all three of these guys, if like Kelenic makes the roster at first and he doesn't pan out for the first month or so of the season, then they'll go to Trammell, or if Trammell doesn't pan out, they'll go to Marlowe, etc. However, whichever way that they want to go about it. And if none of those guys pan out, then all right, you look at the trade market, you figure it out from there. But I think, trying to give these guys ample opportunity to get back on the horse here, I mean, it would be huge. It would pay big dividends for the future of this organization. So yeah, again, going back to just the whole, it's the opening day thing and how much better they are at opening day this year than last year. I mean, you do have to factor in full year of George Kirby, full year of Luis Castillo, full year of Cal Raleigh, who, after he's turned it around, like all that stuff. Like you do have to factor in that stuff as well. I think this team, while maybe if you just look at the offseason moves as a whole, don't think that they did a lot to close the gap between them and the Astros. I think the full picture, though, they have closed the gap between them and the Astros quite a bit. And also part of that is because the Astros haven't really gotten that much better this year.
No, they essentially swapped out Verlander for Abreu. That's been it, really. They brought back Brantley, but...
Yeah, they're going to get Brantley back from injury. And then they have Abreu. And that's it, right? That's all they've done.
Yeah,
and,
for
we'll
the bigger moves. Yeah,
and I'm sure like Hunter Brown is going to be good, but he's not going to be
7 wins.
He's not going to be Justin Verlander. Yeah.
Right. We say that, and then
of course, yeah,
those dang Astros. But
like Jeremy Pena last year, right? It was like Carlos Correa is going to leave, and whatever.
That's huge. They can't replace that. And
yeah.
I mean, Pena wasn't quite that. I mean, Pena had a sub 300 on base. I feel like he's really over.
He had a really good postseason. That's why
he did. But I do feel like he's still overrated. But whatever, he's still good. I mean, he's just he's like, I think he came in at like number 5 on the top 10 top 10 shortstop list. I was like, nah, no.
So on the topic of left field, Jerry keeps on mentioning Taylor Trammell.
He certainly has mentioned Taylor Trammell a lot, and not just with us either. It seems like he's gone out of his way a few times in his weekly with 710 to kind of mention, the good things that Taylor did last year and how he was kind of a victim of start and stop with a couple of injuries, and they really like where his swing's at, and he's apparently, still in town and he's working with Driveline on perfecting the swing and all that stuff. So Jerry certainly doesn't sound like a guy who's ready to give up on Taylor Trammell or just throw him into a trade package just because he's extra right now. Like, it sounds like they really think Taylor Trammell can be something. And if he is, then that's great, because that kind of solves your DH thing that you have. Or it's, Kelnick is now a luxury instead of a must-have. So obviously rooting for Taylor. We're big Taylor Trammell fans on this show. And so, but yeah, I mean, last year, again, the strikeouts got pretty bad at the end, but he posted a 99 WRC plus. And I think he was like 1 for his last 35 or something like that. And that's what really tanked the rest of his numbers. So, but he drew walks last year. We saw the power. We actually saw him do a decent job at avoiding strikeouts for an extended time too. And then the second injury hit. And again, it's worth noting, like Jerry did, like he basically, had like 2 or 3 spring trainings, right? Because he had the first one, then he went down to Tacoma, got hurt, and he missed 4 weeks. And then he got a couple of games in Peoria at the complex league, and that was it. And then he was back in the big leagues, and then he got hurt again. And when he recovered from that injury, he went back to Tacoma for a couple of weeks and then came back to the big league club. So it was very, start and stop type of season for him, but there were a lot of good things that we saw. So the fact that Jerry keeps bringing him up unprompted seems to indicate to me, at least, that the Mariners are less willing to say Jared Kelnick is the left fielder than we are. And it also makes me feel pretty good that Trammell has a really good shot of winning a bench spot.
Well, yeah, because, Jerry mentioned JK off of the cuff, and then like you had to ask him specifically about Cade Marlowe, but he said Taylor Trammell's name outright a couple times. So it's interesting. And, this, again, would have major implications for the future of the organization if someone like Taylor Trammell figures it out and finds success. And it seems like he did figure something out before that second injury, like you mentioned. And, to end up with a WRC plus of 99 after going, whatever it was to end the season, like that's still pretty impressive. He finished the year essentially as a league average hitter. So, yeah, if he's healthy, and the reports about his swing are legit, the swing changes that he's making, then I'm pretty excited to see Taylor Trammell this spring.
Yeah, over the last few weeks, Trammell is really like jumped up my list of like guys I really want to see in spring.
Yeah.
Which is a show we're obviously going to do at some point, probably in February. But yeah, Trammell will definitely be on that list. And keep in mind, like away from the plate, he's a really good defender. He can actually play center field for you. He's probably better than Kelenic in left or right. Kelenic has a better arm, but he's probably better defensively than anybody you have, if we're being honest, including Julio. And he's a pretty good base runner. Not really base stealer, but he runs well when he's healthy. So it's a 5-tool type of profile if he can hit. Can he hit? I guess we're about to find out. But it's a big year for him and Jared both.
So moving over to the rotation, we had Jerry answer a question that has been commonly asked to us about the number 5 spot.
It's Marco.
It's Marco. Yeah. It's I think he said essentially that it's Marco without actually, outright explicitly saying it's Marco. First of all,
I can't imagine listening to that and being like, Chris has a shot. No.
Yeah, no, because I mean, he outright said like, we don't think Marco's stuff can tick up in the bullpen. Right? But we think Flexen's can.
Or we thought it could.
Or we thought it
could.
And
then he talked about, there's some value in having. What I took away from that little conversation is Marco is the 5, and there is not going to be a 6. Like,
yeah,
but Flexen will make the team as a long guy.
And there seems to be really no chance for Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, et cetera. Because again, we've been asked this quite a bit. Does Bryce Miller have a chance to make it out of spring training? And it seems like the answer from Jerry there was no. Was a pretty definitive no as well.
Like not no, but like. No.
Well, he mentioned none of these guys have pitched above AA, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah. So
he's not going to come out and say like, no, Bryce Miller's going back to AA.
Yeah,
because you want to leave open the possibility.
Yeah,
because Miller might be better than both of those guys right now, but you don't have to rush it. So
sure.
Yeah, that part for me, that was one of the things that I wrote down. I was like, Marco's the 5.
Marco seems to be the 5. Barn and trade. At
right.
least.
If all 5 of those guys are healthy and they're on the roster, those are the 5. Period.
Yeah,
it's not going to be Chris.
And it seems that Jerry values the reward over the risk with Marco. He mentioned the quality starts, the 18 to 20 quality starts that he thinks Marco can give them. So, while there's going to be the obvious blow up, and even Jerry outright, mentioned that, there's a little more safety with Marco maybe than Flexen.
Yeah, Jerry seems to think so. I think he also thinks there's a little more upside too, though.
Sure.
With Marco, because he did mention, how good he was 2018 to 2020, and he was really good. So if he can get back to that, then Marco's a number 4 at worst. If Marco gets back to what he was in 2018 and 2019, he's a number 4. If he gets back to what he was in 2020, he's a 3. So, and plus, I think there's some leadership stuff that they don't want to, anger Marco about, and I think it makes sense for Marco to be the heavy favorite, which I think is like the weakest qualifier I can give based on what Jerry said, because what we should all be saying is Marco's the 5.
Yeah.
But because we want to leave open just a little bit of wiggle room here, we'll be like, he's the heavy favorite to be the 5.
Yeah. I think what it really is like, we're not necessarily letting him win the job. We're letting him lose the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. Anything else that stood out to you that you want to go over here?
Yes. Let me pull up my list.
Handy dandy show sheet.
It's 3 pages long. Do we have enough for that? We have enough time for that.
I think we're already at 27 minutes.
Yeah,
By the way, if you guys saw a cut in the middle of this, guess what happened? Technical difficulties. Who could have guessed that?
Guess whose computer it was this time?
Yeah. It was mine. Yeah. Mine literally just ceased to exist. It just stopped. It just stopped. Right. I was like, cool. All right, fun. Thanks.
Yeah. So a couple things that stood out. Jerry really seems to like Justin Topa. He told us about this metric or whatever they have in the org called pitch grade poppers, which needs a better name.
PGP.
PGPs. And he mentioned that Topa is one of those guys that is likely headed for that. And it was pretty cool to hear him talk about how they've kind of evolved in their because before it was a lot like we had talked about like, oh, just throw this pitch a little bit more and see if that works. And now they're actually going to arm angles and locations and grips and stuff like that. So PGPs, and he specifically mentioned Topa. I still don't see how Topa makes the team unless the Mariners trade out of their bullpen again. But he does have an option left. So, and obviously he's going to get big league time at some point this year. Most asked about players and trade talks was an interesting. Bryce Miller, obviously, and that one wasn't that big of a surprise. Brian Wu was the other one, which for us is not a surprise because we are on the Brian Wu bandwagon. So
I love how a couple of you noticed our smirks when he mentioned Brian Wu. Shout out to you guys.
Yep. You observant little devils, you. See, guys, this is why if you're not watching on YouTube, you should do that too, because you get stuff like that. Michael Arroyo was a funny one, specifically for Ty's reaction. Jerry,
I guess maybe he is Edgar at the end of the day. Maybe he actually is.
I mean, Jerry didn't confirm, but he didn't deny. So the question we never asked.
Now, I got to be real. I did see a more recent video of Michael Arroyo the other day. That follow through is very Edgar-esque. I do understand why someone could see that and go, that reminds me of Edgar.
And Hogan Windish is clearly Michael Young, but
clearly, yes.
I didn't get to ask him about Windish. I almost did instead of Marlowe. To be honest with you, I was like, "Oh, really? I should ask about Windish." And I was like, "No, the people want to know about Marlowe." I took that one for you guys. Okay, so you better appreciate it.
And then I would say there might be a pretty decent chance we'll have another opportunity to talk to Jerry in the future. So
I think you probably creeped him out with all the chills stuff.
The chill stuff. No, days, he loved that.
He loved it at first, but now he's like looking at you. You're like the Twitter, and he's like, "This is overboard a little bit." So.
He's definitely walking around the office right now at T-Mobile Park, going
chills,
up to people.
Jerry,
he's like, "Chills." Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, he loved that. Did you see how much his face lit up when I mentioned the Abraham Toro thing?
Yes. Which basically confirmed our long-held belief that Jerry was just up there, like
flipping the bird to everyone,
like pounding his chest, like, "Come at me, bro! What I tell you." But, anyways, and then the last thing that I have here, and we could probably do like an hour just on on everything he said. But the 6-year window as to how they kind of like frame payroll and acquisition and stuff like that. It's nice to have a number put on it. 6 years, very specific. Mentioned it a couple times about 6 years. So, if you're wondering, why doesn't Jerry spend this much this year, or why is he looking so far ahead? Their plan has been a 6-year rolling window. And I believe we're in the second year of the second window because Jerry is in year 7, right? Or 8. I think this is 8th year. So first 6-year window went pretty well. So maybe just give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Just saying. But that's about it. I think that's all we have time for.
Yeah. I think that's he had some really interesting comments about the draft and college players that he thinks this is a better college class than in the last couple of years. He obviously that's evident in what their strategy has been in the last couple of drafts, going prep heavy. So maybe this is back to going college heavy again. It's reverting back to the pre 2021 Mariners draft. So we'll see. I know you have some college guys that you like, so that was probably good news for you to hear. So, so all that stuff is really fun. And if you want to watch the full interview or listen to it, it's if you're on our podcast page right now, you can see the episode right below this one, or find it on our YouTube page. And there's like 40 minutes worth of stuff with Jerry. He was really generous with his time, way more generous than he needed to be with his time. He was very understanding with the Zoom thing that I left in the show. Jerry was really cool about it, and so hopefully we have another opportunity to talk with him and maybe ask him about Hogan Windish.
Stop scaring him, and maybe we will.
All right. The GIF is the last thing. The GIF is the last. Also, if you want to see if you want to see it, it's no, it's not. But that's your idea. That's your idea,
and it's a good idea.
So if it pushes Jerry over the edge, it's your fault.
I really don't think it is. But
I'm blaming you for that. But yeah. Also, if you want to see me explain the chills meme to Jerry, you can find that on our YouTube. It's our first YouTube short, which we're going to be doing more YouTube shorts starting next month, I believe. So yeah, look forward to that. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's CANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And folks, I think one Mr. Patnode here might be acquiring a new webcam soon. So we'll see. Maybe he'll have a little bit of a different look next week. We'll see. We'll have to see. He said that he kind of cheaped out on it, though, because, you know, he doesn't care about you guys. I do, though. So thank you again for making us your first listen. Now make your second
one giveaway, listen. And all of a sudden he's the man of the people. Giving away my entire card collection, but no, Ty's the man of the people. Okay.
Now make your second listen. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day and a beautiful baseball weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Peace.